There is a strange stretch of time in the middle of building wealth where everything feels like it is broken. You are doing the work. You have changed your habits. You have stopped making the mistakes you used to make without even thinking about them. But when you open your banking app and look at the numbers, it still feels underwhelming. It feels slow. It feels like maybe the sacrifices are not adding up the way they were supposed to. And here's what makes it worse. You look around and see people who seem to be doing less, planning less, caring less about their financial future, and somehow they look like they're doing better than you. Nicer apartments, newer cars, trips that you keep telling yourself you will take next year. So you start wondering whether any of this is actually going to work. Whether the spreadsheets and the budgets and the automatic transfers are just busy work that makes you feel responsible without actually making you wealthy. I am going to walk you through 12 signs that wealth is heading in your direction, even if your bank account has not received the memo yet. Because wealth rarely announces itself. It builds in the background, quietly, unglamorously, in ways that are almost impossible to see when you are standing in the middle of them. My name is Ivan, and I spend a lot of time studying the psychology behind why some people build lasting wealth while others stay financially stuck for decades despite earning good money. If that kind of thing interests you, consider subscribing. Number 1, you have started negotiating the big things instead of clipping coupons. There is a phase early in financial awareness where you obsess over small savings. You drive across town for cheaper gas, you spend 20 minutes comparing 2 brands of pasta sauce to save 40 cents. And those habits are not bad. But at some point, the people who actually build wealth make a critical shift. They stop optimizing pennies and start negotiating dollars. According to a 2025 survey from Resume Genius, 55% of American workers accept their initial salary offer without negotiating at all. They leave money sitting on the table before their first day of work even begins. Meanwhile, among the people who do negotiate, 85% walk away with a better offer. That single conversation, lasting maybe 15 minutes, can be worth thousands of dollars a year compounded over a career. Rich Richard spends zero time hunting for promo codes online. What he does instead is call his landlord every 12 months and negotiate his rent renewal. He researches comparable units in the neighborhood, presents the data calmly, and either gets a reduction or a freeze while rents around him climb 3 to 5% annually. He negotiated his last salary offer up by 11%. One phone call, 15 minutes. That added roughly $8,000 to his annual income before his first paycheck even arrived. Poor Peter has a folder on his phone full of coupon apps. He knows which grocery store has the best deal on everything from paper towels to frozen pizza. He saved roughly $600 last year doing this, but he never negotiated his salary. He never questioned his rent increase. He never called his insurance company to ask for a better rate. He saved $600 in coupons and left tens of thousands of dollars in leverage completely untouched. Over 5 years, Richard's 2 negotiation habits, rent and salary, will have saved or earned him over $60,000 more than Peter. And Peter spent more cumulative hours doing his coupon research than Richard spent on all of his negotiations combined. When you start thinking about where the real money lives, where the high leverage conversations are instead of the high effort small wins, that shift in focus is a wealth signal. It means your financial brain is maturing. Number 2, your reaction to financial news has fundamentally changed. Think back to how you used to respond when you saw a headline about the stock market dropping, or when inflation numbers came in higher than expected, or when someone on social media posted about an economic crash that was supposedly just around the corner. If you are like the majority of people, that kind of news used to create a physical reaction. Tight chest, racing thoughts, the urge to log into your brokerage account and do something to protect yourself from whatever scary thing the headline was warning about. But something has shifted. You still read the news, you still pay attention, but the panic is gone. The urgency has evaporated. You have started watching financial news the way a seasoned pilot watches turbulence. You acknowledge it, you stay aware, but you do not grab the controls and start making erratic adjustments. Rich Richard sees a headline about the market dropping 8% in a week. He reads the article, checks whether anything has fundamentally changed about the economy, and then goes about his day. His automatic contributions keep running. His portfolio stays untouched. He might even feel a quiet optimism because he knows he is buying shares at a discount this month. Poor Peter sees the same headline and immediately sells half his portfolio. He tells himself he will buy back in when things stabilize, but he never does. He watches the market recover over the next 3 months from the sidelines, and by the time he reinvests, he has locked in losses and missed the rebound entirely. This shift from reactive to observational is not something you can force. It comes from experience, from education, and from having enough financial foundation that a market dip does not threaten your daily life. Studies on investor behavior consistently show that the average retail investor underperforms the very funds they invest in by roughly 1 to 2% per year, almost entirely because of emotional buying and selling at the wrong times. If you have reached that point where headlines no longer dictate your investment behavior, even partially, your relationship with money has matured past where the majority of people ever get. Number 3, you have done the math on your commute. This one sounds oddly specific, but stay with me because it reveals something important about how your brain has started processing financial decisions. The average American spends somewhere around $5,000 to $6,000 a year on commuting costs when you factor in gas, insurance, vehicle depreciation, tolls, parking, and maintenance. But the number that almost nobody calculates is the time cost. If you commute 45 minutes each way, that is 90 minutes a day, roughly 375 hours a year. At a blended rate of $30 an hour, that is over $11,000 in time value. And at some point, you did that math. Maybe not with a spreadsheet, but you started thinking about your commute as a financial decision with a real cost attached to it. Rich Richard moved to an apartment that cost $200 more per month, but cut his commute from 50 minutes to 12. He saves roughly $130 a month in gas and parking alone, which means the actual net cost of the closer apartment is about $70. But the real savings is time. He gets an extra hour and 15 minutes back every single day. Over a year, that is more than 300 hours he reinvests into a freelance project that now generates additional income. Poor Peter drives 55 minutes each way because his apartment is cheaper on paper. He has never calculated what that commute actually costs him. The gas, the wear on his car, the oil changes that come twice as often as they should, the exhaustion that makes him order takeout instead of cooking when he gets home, the time he could spend building something else. He is saving $200 a month in rent and losing far more than that in ways he has never measured. When you start evaluating major life decisions through the lens of total cost, including the invisible costs, you are thinking like someone who builds wealth. That kind of analysis does not happen by accident. It is a sign your financial operating system has upgraded. Number 4, your definition of success has quietly shifted. This one is subtle and it happens so gradually that you might not even notice it until someone points it out. A couple of years ago, success meant visible things. A nicer car, a bigger apartment, clothes that signaled you were doing well. The markers of success were external and they were designed to be seen by other people. But at some point, your internal scoreboard changed. Success started meaning things like having 6 months of expenses saved, or knowing that if your job disappeared tomorrow, you would be fine for a while, or having the freedom to say no to a project that pays well but makes you miserable. The shift is from performance to substance, from looking successful to actually being secure. And the uncomfortable truth is that those two things often look very different from the outside. Rich Richard drives a car that is 8 years old. His watch costs $40. His apartment is fine, but not impressive. If you met him at a party, you would never guess he has a 6-figure investment portfolio growing quietly in the background, and he likes it that way. His definition of success is not tied to what other people think when they look at him. It is tied to how he feels when he opens his financial dashboard on a Sunday morning. Poor Peter's definition of success is still anchored to appearances. He upgraded his car because he felt embarrassed pulling into the office parking lot in his old one. He bought new furniture because a friend's apartment made his look outdated. Every financial decision runs through the filter of how it will look to someone else, and that filter is extraordinarily expensive to maintain. If your version of success has shifted from external validation to internal security, that is one of the most reliable predictors that wealth is heading your way because you have stopped feeding the machine that keeps most people financially stuck. Number 5, you have started reading the fine print. This is not glamorous, but at some point you started actually reading the terms and conditions before you signed things. You started looking at the interest rate structure on your credit card statement. You started checking what fees your investment accounts are charging you. You started reading your lease agreement all the way through instead of just signing wherever the landlord pointed. And this matters more than it seems. Poor financial literacy costs Americans an estimated $246 billion collectively in 2025. According to the National Financial Educators Council, that is not theoretical money. That is real dollars lost through misunderstood terms, hidden fees, unfavorable contracts, and financial products that people signed up for without fully understanding what they were agreeing to. Rich Richard noticed that his old brokerage account was charging him an expense ratio of 0.85%. That does not sound like much until you run the numbers. On a portfolio of $100,000, that is $850 a year. Over 20 years with growth, that fee eats tens of thousands of dollars. He moved his investments to an index fund charging 0.03%. That single act of reading the fine print and understanding what it meant will save him more money over his lifetime than most people save in a decade of coupon clipping. Poor Peter has never looked at his expense ratios. He does not know what his credit card's penalty, APR, is. He signed a gym contract with a 12-month commitment and an automatic renewal clause that he did not read, and now he is paying $49 a month for a gym he stopped going to 5 months ago. The willingness to slow down and understand the financial agreements you enter into is a wealth signal. It means you have moved from passively accepting financial terms to actively evaluating them. That is a quiet but meaningful upgrade. Number 6. Your grocery cart tells a different story than it did 2 years ago. Look, this is not about spending more or spending less at the grocery store. It is about what you are choosing to put in the cart and why. At some point, you started treating your body like an asset instead of an afterthought. You connected the dots between your physical health and your financial future. And the math supports this. Chronic health conditions are one of the largest wealth destroyers in America. Medical debt is the leading cause of bankruptcy. The average cost of managing type 2 diabetes alone is over $9,000 per year. Meanwhile, the cost difference between eating processed food and eating whole, nutrient-dense food is roughly $15 to $20 per week. Rich Richard spends about $80 more per month on groceries than he did 2 years ago. He buys more fresh produce, lean protein, and whole grains. He meal preps on Sundays. He eats out less often. He does not think of this as a food expense. He thinks of it as a health investment that will pay returns for decades in the form of lower medical costs, more energy, better sleep, and a longer working life. Poor Peter eats cheaply, but poorly. Fast food, 3 or 4 times a week. Frozen meals on the nights he does not feel like going out. He saves roughly $60 a month compared to Richard's grocery bill, but he is tired by 3 in the afternoon every day. He sleeps poorly, and he has started noticing his blood pressure creeping up at his annual physical. When your grocery cart starts reflecting long-term thinking instead of short-term convenience, that is your financial brain making a connection that the majority of people never make. Health and wealth are not separate categories. They are deeply intertwined. A person who avoids a single chronic health condition over their lifetime saves not just $9,000 or $10,000 a year in direct medical costs, but also preserves their earning capacity, their energy, and their ability to work on projects that generate income well into their 60s and 70s. The people who build lasting wealth almost always figure that out early. Number 7, you have stopped treating tax season like a lottery. Here is a question that reveals more about someone's financial trajectory than almost anything else you could ask them. When tax season arrives, are you hoping for a big refund, or are you aiming to break even? The average American tax refund in 2025 was roughly $3,200, and most people treat that refund like a windfall. It feels like free money, it feels like a bonus. They spend it quickly, often on something they have been wanting but could not justify buying with regular income. But that refund is not a bonus. It is your own money that you overpaid to the government throughout the year, interest-free. You gave the federal government a $3,000 loan for 12 months and they paid you back exactly what you lent them. Rich Richard adjusted his withholdings so that he breaks roughly even at tax time. Instead of overpaying throughout the year and waiting for a refund, he keeps that money in his paycheck each month and invests the difference. That extra $267 per month invested consistently at an average return of 8% over 10 years turns into roughly $49,000. Same money, completely different outcome. If you have found yourself caring less about the size of your refund and more about whether your withholdings are optimized, if the idea of giving the government an interest-free loan bothers you in a way it never used to, your financial thinking has matured past the refund mentality that keeps most people stuck. If you are finding value in these signs and they are helping you think about money differently, take a second and hit that subscribe button. I put out content like this regularly, and there is a link in the description to a free quiz that will help you figure out where you actually stand financially and what to focus on next. It takes about 2 minutes and it is tailored to your situation. Now back to the list. Number 8, you have built a system for spending, not just a system for saving. This is a distinction that separates people who build wealth sustainably from people who burn out trying. Early in the financial awareness journey, everything is about restriction. Cut this, eliminate that, stop spending on things you enjoy. The entire framework is built around saying no. And that works for a while, but eventually it creates a pressure that has to release somewhere. You restrict for 3 months and then blow $500 on something impulsive because you feel deprived. Restrict, release, guilt, repeat. The people who actually build lasting wealth eventually move past restriction and into allocation. They build a system where spending is intentional and planned, not eliminated. They give themselves categories where spending is encouraged: travel fund, experience fund, guilt-free fund money that is budgeted and protected, not scraped together from whatever is left over. Rich Richard has a monthly budget that includes $350 specifically earmarked for things that make his life enjoyable. Dinners with friends, a concert ticket, a new book. That money is not leftovers. It is a line item, just like his investment contributions and his rent. He spends it without guilt because it is part of the plan. Poor Peter oscillates between extreme frugality and impulsive spending. He goes 3 weeks eating rice and canned soup, feeling virtuous about his discipline, then drops $400 on a weekend because he feels like he deserves it. Over the course of a year, he spends more than Richard does on discretionary purchases, but it never feels intentional and it always comes with a regret. When you stop trying to eliminate spending and start trying to direct it, when you build a system that says yes to the right things instead of no to everything, that is a sign your financial framework has become sustainable enough to last. Number 9, your browser history has quietly changed. Take a look at what you have been searching for, reading about, and watching online over the last few months. Not what you think you should be consuming, but what you actually are consuming when nobody is watching. 2 years ago, your browsing time might have been dominated by social media feeds, shopping sites, and whatever algorithm-driven rabbit hole pulled you in that evening. But if your browsing habits have shifted, even slightly, toward financial education, investment research, career development, or skill building, that shift tells a story about where your head is. Rich Richard's recent browser history includes articles about index fund performance over the last 30 years, a thread about how to negotiate commercial lease terms for a small business, and a video breaking down the mechanics of tax loss harvesting. He did not search for any of this because someone told him to. He searched because he was curious. The curiosity came naturally because his financial identity has shifted. Poor Peter's recent browser history is mostly entertainment and shopping, streaming recommendations, social media, sports highlights. If that is the entirety of your information diet, your financial operating system is not getting any new inputs. It is running on the same software it had last year and the year before that. The information you consume shapes the decisions you make, and the decisions you make over 5 years shape your financial life. When your curiosity shifts toward wealth-building topics without anyone forcing it, that is your subconscious signaling that your financial identity is evolving. Number 10, you have stopped measuring wealth by income and started measuring it by margin. This is one of the biggest mental shifts that separates people who will be wealthy from people who will always feel like they are chasing it. Income is the number everyone obsesses over. Salary negotiations, raise percentages, side hustle revenue, how much is coming in, but income is only half the equation. The other half, the half that actually determines whether you build wealth, is margin. The gap between what you earn and what you spend. When you start paying more attention to the gap than to the gross number, you have crossed a psychological threshold that changes everything. A person earning $60,000 a year who spends $40,000 has a margin of $20,000. A person earning $120,000 who spends $115,000 has a margin of $5,000. The first person is building wealth 4 times faster than the second person despite earning half as much. Richard knows his margin down to the dollar. He tracks it monthly. Not obsessively, just clearly. He knows that his margin last month was $2,100 and that it went into his investment account on the first of the following month. He does not care that his coworker makes $20,000 more than he does because he suspects, correctly, that his coworker's margin is a fraction of his own. Poor Peter knows his salary. He knows his hourly rate, he knows what his paycheck looks like after taxes, but he has no idea what his margin is because he has never calculated it. Money comes in, money goes out, and whatever is left at the end of the month, if anything, sits in checking until it gets absorbed by the next unplanned expense. The shift from income-focused to margin-focused thinking is a fundamental rewiring of how you evaluate your financial position. It also explains something that confuses a lot of people, which is why so many high earners end up with almost nothing saved. The income was never the problem. The margin was, and it is one of the clearest predictors that wealth is being built, even if the income number itself has not changed dramatically. Number 11, you have become the person people ask for money advice. Pay attention to this one because it sneaks up on you. At some point over the last year or two, the people in your life started coming to you with financial questions. A friend asks whether they should open a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA. A sibling wants to know if refinancing their mortgage makes sense right now. A coworker asks you what index funds you invest in, and you might think this is just casual conversation, but it is actually social proof of something deeper. People do not ask for advice from someone they perceive as financially lost. They ask the person they have been watching make quiet, consistent, smart moves over time. Even if you do not feel like an expert, the people around you have noticed that your financial trajectory is different from theirs. They may not say it directly, but they are paying attention. Richard gets asked money questions regularly. He does not lecture. He does not brag. He just shares what he has learned from his own experience. And the interesting side effect is that being the person people come to for advice actually reinforces his own habits. Teaching something is one of the fastest ways to internalize it. Every time he explains compound interest to a friend or walks a coworker through the basics of opening a brokerage account, he deepens his own understanding and his own commitment. Poor Peter never gets asked about money, not because people think he is stupid, but because his financial choices are visible in ways that do not inspire confidence. The finance car, the constant complaint about being broke. People notice these things even if they never say anything. If you have become the person others turn to for financial guidance, even informally, that is a sign that your financial behavior has created a reputation you did not even realize you were building. Number 12, you have started noticing how expensive it is to be broke. This last one is the sign that reveals the deepest level of financial awareness. At some point, you stopped seeing financial struggle as just the absence of money and started seeing it as an active, ongoing cost. Being broke is not free. It is one of the most expensive conditions a person can be in. Late payment fees, overdraft charges, higher interest rates on everything, from car loans to credit cards because your credit score suffers when you are living on the edge. The inability to buy in bulk when something is on sale. Payday loans that charge annual rates exceeding 300%. Security deposits that tie up money you desperately need elsewhere. The Federal Reserve has estimated that the average American household in the bottom income quartile pays over $2,400 per year in fees and charges that wealthier households simply do not encounter. That is a poverty premium, a tax on not having enough money. And the cruel irony is that these costs make it even harder to build the financial cushion that would eliminate them. Rich Richard noticed this pattern years ago. He saw how overdraft fees used to eat $35 at a time from his checking account when he was younger. He saw how his first car loan carried an interest rate of 14% because his credit score was in the low 600s. He calculated how much those costs had added up over the years and the number was staggering. So he made eliminating those invisible taxes his first priority. Build the buffer. Fix the credit. Get to the point where being financially stable saves you money every single month just by existing. Poor Peter is still paying these costs. $35 here for a late fee, $50 there for an overdraft, a credit card, APR of 24% because his credit score has not improved in years. Those small charges add up to over $2,000 a year, money that could have been invested, compounded, and grown into something meaningful over time. When you can look at someone else's financial struggle and see not just the emotional toll, but the mathematical toll, when you can quantify exactly how much it costs to live without a financial cushion, you have reached a level of financial understanding that changes how you make every single decision. And once you see this pattern, you cannot unsee it. It rewires your urgency around building that first layer of financial stability. If you recognized even 5 or 6 of these 12 signs in your own life, understand what that means. The boring, invisible work you have been putting in is working. The sacrifices that nobody sees and nobody congratulates you for are compounding in ways that will become obvious in a few years. The reason it does not feel dramatic right now is because real wealth never does. It builds in silence and grows in the background. And by the time anyone notices, including you, the foundation is already built. Keep going.